Woke brain virus began to infect the last remaining meritocracy in this country, the bedrock guarantee of our safety and our freedom. That's the U.S. military. If that happened, it would be a legitimate disaster. The military, we have all been told since childhood, doesn't care what you look like. They don't care what your parents did. They don't care where you're from. Your identity is irrelevant to the armed services. The U.S. military cares about your performance. That's it. That's why the U.S. military is impressive. That's why they've been able to keep us from being invaded, because they only care about what matters. And what matters is protecting the United States. Not anymore. Last week, the acting Secretary of Defense, a man called Chris Miller, announced that the U.S. military will be changing its standards from top to bottom. Not to create a more effective fighting force to save your children from China or other foreign domination. No. In order to conform to policies formulated by the Pentagon's so-called Diversity and Inclusion Board. And you can imagine what those policies are. Strict affirmative action, hiring and promoting by appearance, the elimination of objective standards. According to Secretary Miller, who should be ashamed of himself, extremist left-wing social engineering is, quote, a moral imperative in the armed forces. He did not explain why this was a moral imperative. Not long ago, an Air Force psychologist called Ryan Warner gave us a glimpse into the thinking behind decrees like this. Warner, whose job it is, keep in mind, to keep America free and safe, instead spends his time pondering the death of a man called George Floyd in Minneapolis. He has decided that something called microaggressions are to blame. Watch.
These innocent, subtle things, they may not seem like a big deal to some, but as we see in today's society, similar to what happened to George Floyd, those microaggressions, those unconscious bias, can ultimately lead to more significant and severe impacts.
Like Secretary Miller, Ryan Warner should be ashamed of himself. Neither one is, of course. Both men are merely symptoms of a larger, long-brewing problem that, unfortunately, the rest of us have ignored for a very long time. While the rest of the country is focused on the remarkable heroism of, for example, SEAL Team 6, worth focusing on, much of our military's leadership was moving in another direction, and they have now come to resemble the anthropology department at Wesleyan. 3 years ago, in September 2017, for example, a general called Jay Silveira went on this rant after a supposed hate crime took place at the Air Force Academy. Watch.
You may have heard that some people down in the prep school wrote some racial slurs on some message boards. If you haven't heard that, I wanted you to hear it from me. If you're outraged by those words, then you're in the right place. That kind of behavior has no place at the prep school, it has no place at USAFA, and it has no place in the United States Air Force. And if you can't treat someone from another race or a different color skin with dignity and respect, then you need to get out.
Settle down, tough guy. The hate crime was a hoax, like so many hate crimes that are reported in the media. It never happened. The U.S. military, by the way, has a long, very long history of treating everyone with respect and dignity because it was a meritocracy. And a meritocracy is designed to treat people with respect and dignity. It treats them on the basis of how they behave, not on the basis of how they look. But this man, the general you just saw, apparently has forgotten that. He's mouthing the words to a hymn written by the hard left, and no one stopped him, or many like him. And so the brain virus spread throughout the U.S. military. This summer, the U.S. Army's so-called Operation Inclusion instructed soldiers that the phrase, "Make America Great Again," was a form of, quote, socially acceptable covert white supremacy. A presidential campaign slogan was white supremacy, according to the Army. Again, no one did anything about that. Now, according to the Army's Equity and Inclusion Agency, and yes, they have one, the phrases "all lives matter," American exceptionalism, and the celebration of Columbus Day are racist. This is from the Army. The people are supposed to be protecting you. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Robert Ashley, recently encouraged his employees to read the lunatic track White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, a book that is inherently bigoted and also stupid. Again, this is the military supposed to be protecting you. Instead, they're reading White Fragility. Over the summer, Caleth Wright, the chief master sergeant of the Air Force at the time, proclaimed on Twitter that his greatest fear was that one of his airmen might be killed by a racist cop. Not killed by the Chinese military, but by American racism. And so on. Where does this end? Can you protect a nation with the military like this?